Changi Airport is getting ready for Singapore's biggest reopening of travel since the pandemic shut down borders last year. At the arrival halls, family members and friends will be able to pick up passengers from low-risk countries or regions. Staff were seen removing signboards which say that family and friends can only pick up passengers at the arrival pickup point. It's been 5 months since pickups were severely restricted following a COVID-19 outbreak at the airport. The easing of rules comes as tourists from 8 more countries can enter Singapore from next Tuesday, October the 19th, under the Vaccinated Travel Lane scheme. Fully vaccinated travellers from Canada, Denmark, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain, the UK and the US won't need to spend any time in quarantine. Professor Teo Yik Ying is back. He's the Dean of NUS's Swee Hock School of Public Health. Prof, within the first day of applications for the 8 new VTLs, at least 700 short-term visitors have been approved to enter Singapore. The number would have grown since then. So while visitors, they mean promising things for our tourism industry, should Singapore residents be concerned in any way that more VTL travellers will be coming in from next Tuesday?
I believe there may be some people in Singapore who are worried about the number of short-term visitors coming into Singapore, especially from countries where the COVID situation seems to be raging still. And opening up to so many countries at one go seemed to be completely different to the border control strategy that Singapore had since March last year, where we were very prudent and risk-averse in allowing short-term visitors in. I would emphasize that the situation now in Singapore, it's very different to the situation last year. And the reason for this difference lies in the vaccination. Singapore now has more than 85% of the population fully vaccinated against COVID. And many of the countries that we have VTL arrangements with, they similarly have vaccination rates in excess of 60%, some even more than 70%. The travel arrangement now is also centered only around fully vaccinated people. So actually, Singapore residents do not need to be overly concerned with these incoming travelers. Now, will there be a risk of leakage, meaning some of these incoming travelers may actually be infected, but not be found by the arrival test? And I think, yes, there certainly will be a few infected travelers that will slip through the testing protocol. But just as how Singapore has moved into a phase of treating COVID as endemic, actually having this few infected travelers into the country is not going to change the trajectory of COVID-19 in Singapore. And I actually should emphasize that these travelers, when they come into Singapore, they would have been tested when they arrive. And they are only allowed to move about when their tests show that it's negative. In comparison, residents like you and me in Singapore, we move about the community now without really being tested at all, except maybe for some workplace requirements. So comparatively speaking, we actually have information that at least these travelers test negative on arrival.
That's a very good point to remember, Prof. Well, other infectious diseases experts believe that border closures are somewhat unnecessary as long as the people crossing the borders are vaccinated. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I would first say that this is forward-looking of them to think this way. And I certainly expect that the world will move towards this model eventually. Very much like how the world treats yellow fever right now, when one travels to any country where yellow fever is actually endemic. But I do think that we, not just Singapore, but the world collectively, we are not there yet. And actually for very practical and operational reasons as well. So people have been wondering about how Singapore chose the countries for the VTLs, at least this current batch of VTLs. And previously, we talked about the reasons being the vaccination rate in these populations. We talk about the economic ties between Singapore and these countries, and also the fact that there are many residents in Singapore from these countries, and also how these countries play host to many Singaporeans studying there or working there. So those are the reasons that we talked about previously. But I think what many people may not have realized is also the state of the health systems in these countries, in terms of the way that they're able to keep records of who have been vaccinated and how do we retrieve this vaccination record in a trusted manner such that it cannot be tampered. as well as whether when we say that a person has been vaccinated, this person indeed has been given a vaccine in a safe and trusted environment. So when it comes to airline and airport authorities, they don't have to worry about whether vaccination records for this incoming traveler is authentic or not. And I think in addition to all that, these are also the countries where the types of vaccines that are used are very similar to what Singapore uses, or those that are approved under the WHO emergency use listing. We don't see strange or new vaccines that are being used by countries which we don't have prior information on. So I think these are additional factors that needs to be considered in order to operationalize a travel lane arrangement. So certainly there are many other countries that will satisfy the conditions that I talk about. And I actually expect that it will be a matter of time that Singapore will announce additional VTL arrangements with these countries. But for some countries, I think this process could happen within the next few weeks. But other countries, this may actually take a much longer time because there are countries that are still ramping up their vaccination, including trying ways to keep tabs of who have been vaccinated or not.